What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of The Block is High. Today we have Viva, and we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff happening in the space. We're going to be talking about education, regulation, transparency, the whole entire balance between being a project owner as well as a content provider, and just a plethora of different questions and honestly highly debated things. And Viva has been in this community for a while. He's constantly on different Twitter spaces. That's actually where I met him recently on Wednesday. I believe, no, it was CNFT Tank. I actually met you in one of the spaces, and we went to talking. We were like, yo, we should have a little bit of a live here and just go over some of these topics. But yes, Viva, how about you introduce yourself to the block? Who are you, and how did you get here?
Welcome. Thank you first for having me. It's an absolute honor, and I appreciate everything you do. I myself, I've been in the CNFT space since early last summer, but I was following along from the inception and knew some of the people within it. And then as far as crypto goes, I've been in it since late 2016. But at the time, just working, not newly out of college, but trying to figure things out, trying to make sense of what blockchain was, what crypto was, went through the whole last cycle and had every high and every low. And in between those two cycles that we just had in 2020, 2021, had a lot of time to digest all that information and just continue to stay on top of it, as well as just macroeconomic events and things that occurred. My background was my master's I went back for was an MBA. So my background is business and finance, although inherently I disagreed with a lot of the things that I saw because it didn't line up with the way that things worked. So it made me more inquisitive and want to dig in and learn what was actually happening. So at a certain point in early 2021, actually after a completely unrelated event of the whole GameStop debacle, although I didn't participate, it did shock me a bit when on a national stage, that entire market froze and, your inability to buy something and shifting the favor back into the powers that be. I think that it was a perfect demonstration of what I was talking to everyone in my life about. So everyone was asking me all these questions about free market and cryptocurrency, and I'd wind up sending 50 different text threads a day to people. And I was like, there has to be a different, better way to communicate. So I made VivalaCoin and not only the Twitter channel, but my initial YouTube videos, as well as my new YouTube channel that's more focused on a project that is near and dear to my heart that I'm on the team Pneumonium on CNFT to cover that type of stuff strictly from an educational standpoint. Myself, I'm not an artist. I'm not a developer. I can't program. But I do talk. I talk for a living. I work in payroll, but more on the sales side and just interface and technology. And to be able to try and educate everyone else bit by bit, day by day, built up a big network of not followers, but friends and people all over the world that are here sort of in this same sort of what I've referred to as a financial revolution in a way that's what we're doing. And I am just absolutely floored every single day that we have the ability to sit here and to help lead the way from an educational standpoint or from a communication standpoint. So all of this I take incredibly seriously. I take this just as serious as an artist might take their CNFT drop because for us, like this is what we do. So the quality of content, the integrity of the information, our transparency in what we know and what we don't know or what we assume, and then our own actions all reflect who we are as individuals. So it's important to me to see people like you that create these videos and come out and put this out for other people. So I was going to bounce it actually back to you and learn more about just the inception of your channel. Not so much your project, because I want to get into that and everything that's upcoming with jelly cubes and things like that, because I think it's incredibly not only needed, but it's very interesting to me from just a business and support and educational standpoint. But when you took that leap and you jumped in and you were like, I'm just going to talk about this, at least for me, it was a little daunting and there's not really an open path. So I want to hear about how you got it.
Dude, I mean, and dude, you're such a good speaker. There was literally like 10 things that I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I remember the whole GameStop thing too, and having very similar thoughts to you. I mean, for me, I first got into crypto in like 2017. I had a buddy that was like super, super geeky, and he's like, dude, we need to build an Ethereum mining rig. Like, this is going to be big, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually ended up doing it. I had bought some graphics cards. We built a whole mining rig, and I had it in my college dorm room at the time where we had free electricity. And at the beginning, I didn't really understand a lot about crypto because back in 2017, when like this was like when I had gotten in, it was like so complicated and there wasn't as much information as there is now. Things are so much easier to get into now than it was back then. And at first, it was kind of just like a money thing. Like, oh, I'm into investing. I like stocks. I see the crypto going crazy. All right, let me start to get into this. And then, kind of as time went on, and I started learning more and more about crypto and NFTs and what this really meant more than just a money incentive. I really became passionate about it and I became curious of all the different things that were coming out. And like when DeFi really started blowing up on Ethereum and, the whole entire thing with PancakeSwap and, Binance Smart Chain really coming out with a lot of projects, I really started learning more about the space. And one of the things that I realized was that a lot of people still don't know about crypto. They still don't know about NFTs. They don't know the real meaning behind what this is about, the real benefit, the real value of having something like Bitcoin. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what, man? I'm tired of just talking to my parents about this all the time. I think I'm pretty knowledgeable broadly about the space. I think it's time to make that next step and try to be an educator as well, because there were so many mistakes that I made in the beginning, so many things that I just simply didn't understand. And because crypto and NFTs is it's such a wall to jump over. Like there's honestly so much information. It's so hard for people to break through sometimes. It's such a barrier that I was like, all right, let me try to at least do my part and cover some of this space.
I love it. And the funny thing about that is around that time when we were first getting in, there was no such thing as crypto YouTube. There were no bit boys, these large channels, whether they're beneficial or not, and everyone has their own opinion on that, including myself. But there wasn't educational resources. It was just kind of shooting, blanks in the dark, trying to figure things out where the value was. At that point, nothing really made sense aside from people looking at the charts and saying, "Oh, this went up in value," because people didn't understand that it wasn't cryptocurrency itself that was inherently valuable, and it wasn't digital currency itself that was inherently valuable. It was blockchain technology that was inherently valuable, and the reorganization of how human beings hold each other accountable. So that was a leap in logic and education that not only took a lot of time for people even that were in that market to understand, but by the time it started to really sink in, is how beneficial this technology was. Everyone started to have their eyes glaze over because you have random tokens like stellar lumens go. I think it was like 160%, like 160kx or something. That was like the first like big altcoin that I bought. That I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, this is absolutely insane. Like this doesn't really compute as far as like traditional business and investment. So there was no real point where people said, okay, let's stop and let's think about this. No one made videos about it. It was just price predictions. And that was kind of the early formation of crypto Twitter and YouTube. And I feel like that carried itself all the way until about early 2021, until we learned that that isn't the case in May, where a lot of people were humbled because everything imploded in the middle of what people thought was a parabolic run up that would go all the way until December. And I feel like people are still trying to get their feet back under themselves almost, a year and a month later, wondering why the market reacted the way that it did. So, back in that point, I wish I would have had people that knew what they were doing, or like we were talking about before we went live, we listened to Charles talk today to, Congress and regulatory boards about all of his information. If we knew what he knew then, or if we found all of his videos and could really digest that information years ago, we would be living entirely different lives at this point. I think a lot of people would be. And I think that that principle still applies to today as people continue to educate themselves.
Yeah, and to kind of go off of that, the education side of things is really such a huge thing to tackle, because it's one of those things where there's so much information to digest that it's hard for a lot of people to really get started. And I think a lot of times people are getting started now based on this whole entire false narrative when it comes to profits, right? Like, oh, this is 100x, 200x your money tomorrow, 10x your money tomorrow, retire tomorrow. And that's where people really start to put their feet in.
Yep.
And what's kind of crazy about this is, even on my channel, I've never done a video where it's like, oh, this is going to 20x or something like that. I try to keep that out because that is painting this false narrative of new people getting in. But it's like, then you look at the videos and the YouTubers that are doing those things. That is what's getting clicked on. That's what people are watching. You could put a thumbnail of like, you're going to 20x your money tomorrow and get 5 to 10 times the amount of views on that channel. So I guess kind of my question to you, because I'm like a super inquisitive and curious person, so I just found myself naturally getting into these different things and researching things. But like, what do you think the solution is for people trying to get into this space? Like, what do you think the solution is to really educating the masses? Because I'll tell you what, man, like, I'm very confident in crypto and NFTs in the long term, simply because of the knowledge that I have on that space. And a lot of times I see people that are getting in very nervous and selling things and freaking out all the time. And I think it's because it's that lack of education. So how do we build up that foundation for new people?
I would say it's not so much just lack of education. I think that once they enter into the market, then that becomes a factor. Prior to them getting in, they have to first make a decision like, I'm going to turn my focus this way. And the money making aspect of cryptocurrency, and then by extension NFTs, over the course of the last 18 months has been a lot of people posting about their gains and posting those predictions and everything else. Now a lot of people have that index, right? Greed and fear, somewhere in between. And it is when we're running up and it's early April of 2021 or late 2017, that greed index is popping. It's breaking. Essentially, we're off the charts. And then at a time like this, or even last week when it was even lower, down to 17.5, we're down at like a 5 on that fear and greed index. And although, yes, it's more or less just assumptive or collective data on people's perception of the market, those are the two metrics that people go off of. But I think that there's some middle ground that a lot of people fall in. Greed and fear, I believe, apply to people that have money or that have market experience. Greed and fear are people that know that the Fed is going to increase interest rates and they want to pull some of their riskier positions, or maybe buy a lot of bonds. Like we saw a record-breaking bond market by December 2021. But I think that the vast majority of people that enter the market, it is out of desperation. So if you look at any broader data points on where we're at least in the United States, the average person, not only we're at a collective all-time high consumer debt, number. We're buried under credit. We're buried under loans. Everything is debt-based. Utilities are through the roof because we have an energy crisis. Every single thing that we're buying is being crushed by inflation. The housing market's stalling out. And I feel like, none of this is financial advice, by the way, for anyone that does listen in. But I feel like we're in a similar position, at least how the market's going to react, that we were in like 2006. But then, those bailouts, if we print a bunch of money and bail people out because we can't just have money because it's all debt and it's all tied up, then we're just going to perpetuate those problems. So as things get more difficult, all it takes is like 5 tweets in a row when you open up social media, whether it's Twitter, Discord, Telegram, whatever you might use. and you see someone talk about how they turned $1,000 into $1 million. And I know people personally that have done that. But when you see that with no other context, and you know that you're about to default on another bill, or if you had an emergency come up next week, you couldn't pay it, or if your headlights go out, and like my both my headlights burnt out last week, so it's a little personal, bill I just had. But if I couldn't pay for that, then I start getting desperate. I'm trying to find different ways to do it. So I could take a skill set that I have and go out and try and work. But the majority of people, you could work up to 60 hours a week and you might not be able to cover your overhead for just necessities and bills and rent, especially since the average rent is up like 20 some percent in most major cities over the course of just this past year. So they're reacting more so out of desperation. It's not that they're afraid to get in or they're so afraid they have to get out. They are just reacting to the prospect of getting their head above water and taking a breath. And that's where, as educators, we try and bridge that gap and speak to as many people as we can on a daily basis to try and fill in those gaps of information. And part of the problem that I've seen between, we mentioned last cycle, especially early in last cycle, there was no crypto YouTube. There was no crypto Twitter, the way that we see it now. Even a lot of the other people, even outside of Cardano, they built a lot of that reputation in their brand, essentially, that they have over the course of the bear market. Prior to that, there wasn't much. Now we swung that pendulum all the way over to where there's too much information. So every person that then has any type of following can report anything that they want to personally gain themselves. So that's where like their greed starts to play in. And I'm sure that, not to put anyone on blast, but we've probably seen dozens upon dozens of examples of crypto YouTubers or Twitter influencers, or maybe even people that we once respected or watched some of their content. And then we knew enough to say, okay, this is just smoke and mirrors, or this is misleading or disingenuous, and I'm not going to participate in giving them another view. And then you try and warn people. So you have these desperate people coming into the market, and since they don't know what they don't know, they're falling into every shitcoin, every dead project, everything that they see come across, assuming that that will be the next 10,000x. And it's never going to be. Out of 20,000 cryptocurrencies that exist, I think, at least in my eyes, there's only about 10 major top, big market cap cryptos that I would even consider viable for the long term. Not looking at an ROI perspective, but looking at it from a functional aspect of decentralized blockchain. But then most NFT projects aren't going to be viable either. It's oversaturated and it's misleading. So we have a very hard road ahead of us to try and figure out how to cut through all of that and to amplify the things that make sense, because oftentimes they're the least attractive conversations to have in a market where everyone promises you eternal wealth.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a ton of points to break down there. I mean, holy crap. There's so many different points, man. And I think to kind of go off of that, I think that, man, you've got my mind racing. I didn't realize this was going to be this deep. This is a deep conversation because there's so many intricacies and so many different major points to bring up.
And while you're thinking, this is part of my personal problem being an educator or someone that not only works in projects and I invest myself and I make my own autonomous decisions where I want to be. With all these spaces emerging, I've quickly found that these types of conversations that lead to the actual long-term success of individuals, that expose flaws in old systems, expose flaws in new systems, or orient people to be successful, no one wants to have any part of it and dissect it and dig a little bit deeper, because it's not fun JPEG, communities. It isn't, just aping into cryptos. And you see every person in their active trade page sharing up their leverage trades and whatever percentage they made on that day. But for the majority of people that don't have the ability to mess up once, let alone mess up daily and then have those wins outweigh the losses. If the average person only has like $500 worth of spare savings, you have probably one or two chances to start getting it right over the course of time. So it's a lot. So sorry if I just kind of.
No, I mean, it's a lot. Like, my brain is trying to think of different solutions to this because, on the very simple side of things, it's like, okay, and I'm trying to reflect this on my life. It's like, okay, I like crypto, I like NFTs, I have a knowledge in this space, right? So I'm going to make content. And when I make content, I have a couple routes that I can go on, and really, I think it's the main reason that you make content. What was your purpose of making content? Was your purpose of making content in order to have opportunities and make money and be able to have influence and leverage in the space? Was your purpose of making content just because you're passionate about it? You wanted to teach other people about it, right? Like, there's different reasons why a content creator will get started. And then within those reasons, there's different things that people can go down. Like, let's just say in my situation, I'm like, okay, like, there's a big opportunity making crypto content. There's not a lot of people doing it. You can grow a following pretty quick as a YouTuber. Like, I'm going to make crypto content. And a lot of people, they might start off with, okay, like, I'm doing this with the right reasons. I'm trying to educate people, even though I see an opportunity. But then it's almost like the slippery slope of, okay, where do you draw the line on things? So for me, very early on in one of my YouTube videos, I said, hey guys, I'm not going to ever do a paid promotion, because to me, that was the line that I had to draw with myself. Like, I wanted to make sure that there was no bias, even unintentional bias, coming from getting paid by someone, right? And what's crazy is, as you go on and as you make videos, it's like, as you gain followers, it's like, I have people hitting me up offering me $2,000 for one YouTube video. And like, for me, I've always said no, but it's crazy how there's a lot of people that might come in for the right reasons, but then there's so much money to be made doing the wrong thing. Hey, I'm going to make a video and not to say names about people in the space, but I'm going to charge, $3,000 or $3,500 for a video, and I don't give a crap what project it is, because they're paying me $3,500 for a 10-minute video, right? Yep. So then you kind of get into this situation where people are like, oh man, that's a lot of money. Like, and it just goes into this whole slippery slope. And then what's crazy is, like, right now, it's almost like doing the wrong thing is incentivized. And so it takes like a very special person to not allow those incentivifications to cause them to say or do things that they personally don't believe.
1,000%. And, when you say people getting offered, either whatever crypto they're representing or projects getting paid in either NFT allocations or certain amount of money, it's rampant. It's something that happens. I've been offered by different people to promote things. My girlfriend has been offered to just randomly promote projects for a considerable amount of money. If you have someone reach out and offer you just a full week's pay on the spot to make a tweet, then you're like, oh, well, that would be pretty cool. But what needs to happen is, when people get into this, if they want to educate, or if they believe the message that they're saying about decentralization being important for, the unbanked, and being important for the people that don't have access to financial literacy, and being important for my own autonomy to be able to pay people when I want to, where I want to, for the reasons why I want to, then there should be no reason to stray from that path. Now, for me, I tend to have a very hard line. Like, most people that know me personally and talk to me on a daily basis within crypto Twitter, who, I'm friends with. One of them's coming down from NFT NYC. They're staying with us starting tomorrow. But for me, I don't have that gray area. And I think that it just has to do with your personal upbringing. So for me, I had a very poor upbringing, especially through my teens and into my 20s. When I say I didn't have a pot to piss in, I mean, I was broker than broke, working unpaid internships, trying to go to community college, pay out of pocket, avoid the loans, go back to school. I've been, it's not about me, but that whole tale. I felt like I was in The Pursuit of Happiness at times. It was one of my favorite movies, but I was homeless twice. I've been through it all, but I never really had money. And at the start of that whole journey, when I was like, okay, I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to go to college and try the best that I can to educate myself beyond just what I'm being told. I was pretty much tapped out. I didn't want to be here. At the time, I didn't really have any good interpersonal or family relationships. Everything was very rocky. And now I'm so thankful, like everything is better, after years of either breaks or building or doing different things. But when you get to that point, you're like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do anything. I'm just like, people have it worse than me. And I know that sounds cliche, but even if I want to give up, even if I don't want to do it, I haven't earned my excuse to give up, right? I haven't suffered that much because I can still stand up and I can still show up and I still have a voice. So in leaning into that and getting into this space, it was never about I'm going to make a channel and I want to educate people, but I also want to make money. It was never about that. It was about educating people. And by extension, as Jay Crypto and other people that I've met, but especially him, he always said is, you get these unintentional benefits or unintentional rewards of doing the right things for the right reasons over time. And even it translates to my professional career to where I do work in sales, but also in payroll and in a very consultative type of way. But, if you've ever worked in any type of sales organization, you wind up just completely, you become like a corporate shill and you're pushing things on people just to hit a quota and to make commission. And I have been quoted in saying multiple times, like, you can fire me. I will not do that. I will not send these mass communication emails. I'm not going to leverage some fake promotion to sell something to a client that doesn't need it. And by extension, in between last cycle and this one, I had the fortunate outcome of being one of the top reps in the entire country year over year over year. So as I pivot, around 2020 and saying like, I want to do this full time, I never had money and it isn't about the money. And if I never made another dime in this market, I'd still show up every single day and do it. But also if this market went to zero tomorrow and we had to go back to work and everything just worked traditionally and it was actually, honest and ethical, I could show up there and I could succeed there as well. So it's not about me picking this point in time to say, oh, I'm going to come in and make money in Web3. It is more or less the principle is to other people not having any shot to get back up on their feet and move forward themselves. And I feel like, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, but if we show up and do the right things every day, and hearing you speak on Shark Tank too, I believe that you agree with that sentiment, that we'll never have to worry about ourselves. We'll never have to use the knowledge that we have to mislead people to benefit ourselves. You'll never have to misconstrue information to get a leg up. Like, it's not about any of that. And by extension, you do okay yourself.
No, and I agree, and I think the doing the right thing is the long-term play. It really is the long-term play, because it's like if you can build a foundation and like really teach people like genuine information, like what you genuinely believe, giving people guides, doing all these things, like even on an opportunist sort of mindset, like you are building a foundation of like brick in a sense. Whereas a lot of people that are simply shilling stuff, like that's going to catch on and that's going to, burn them too. And I do think that there's so much more incentive than just, okay, how can I benefit myself? But there's the incentive of benefiting others through that, whether it's entertaining others, encouraging others to grow. Just recently, I even put a tweet out there of like a motivational video I like watching, and one of the things that I want to do with the whole Block Investment Group project is have this concept of just being the absolute best person that you can be. So I wear this hoodie all the time. It has like 3 commas and it represents the 3 commas in $1 billion, man. And it's really about that mentality of like really pushing yourself and believing in yourself and striving to be the best you can be. And I feel like a lot of times in my life, I didn't necessarily have that person that was like telling me, oh, you can do this, you can achieve this. And, I've really had to find that mindset myself. And I see a lot of people, whether friends or family, or even people that watch my videos that don't even know the how much they're capable of, and the different limits they can break. And for me, that's been something super motivating too, is being able to have a voice, and being able to have a positive, hopefully have a positive influence on the people watching. Because if you watch, let's say, general mainstream media, who are you seeing? You're seeing people like Kim Kardashian and Logan Paul and KSI, and it's a bunch of people that are essentially saying, okay, this is how you should live life. This is what success looks like. Oh, you need this purse, you need this house, you need this car. Like, this is what's valuable. And for me, one thing that I realized, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, is I can be a voice that paints a different narrative. Like, hey, it's about trying to help other people. It's about, and I wear plain white and black t-shirts every day. Hey, it's not about this expensive watch or this car, but it's really about living a life that you're happy about, and doing it in a way that you can be proud of. And honestly, I'm curious how you kind of got to that point yourself, where you're just so incredibly passionate about the education of crypto and NFTs. Like, why have you gotten to this point?
Well, without giving you a 2 hour long soliloquy, because I know we only have about an hour and a half, I can probably surmise it a little bit more concisely. But even seeing the comments and people come up, I know that you're just getting used to the YouTube live stuff, and that's what you're doing. And they mentioned multiple times, I see here about you having integrity and authenticity, and those things matter to people. For me, I think that all the way back to my childhood, like I wasn't a super popular individual. I was super overweight, through all of my childhood and half of my young adulthood. Between people either bullying other individuals and just sort of getting away from everything, just had to sit there and essentially live in my own head. And I never liked people that treated others poorly. So I spent a lot of my time around those years with all the people that weren't necessarily the coolest, or weren't the popular kids or anything like that. And I think that it taught me very early on that not only does everyone have something to offer, bring to the table, but I didn't like people that put others down. I didn't like people that took advantage of other people. I didn't like people that would say one thing and do another. That whole idea of integrity of who a person was, it became so important to me. And as we continue to go through life, you learn a little bit more. And at that point, shifting over more into the business world and more into how things work, to say that I was not so much angry, but I was disgusted and embarrassed the more I learned about the way that these systems worked, because I understood that it isn't for me and it's not for you or anyone else that's commenting. There's a very, clear barrier to where the people that have had it will continue to have it. And if someone else starts to build themselves up, you just cram that ceiling down on top of them. And a couple people will slip through, and you see some tech innovators, get through the cracks nowadays, even in Web 2. But for the most part, the average quality of life has gone down as of late, and will continue to do so, just based on all these different factors. All this, wealth transfer and opportunity that's supposed to come our way after dealing with going through college around the last recession, with a fraudulent housing market, or a currency that is backing everything on earth that is backed by nothing, because we decoupled it, because we like to finance wars around the world to push certain narratives. It just it struck a nerve in me, to where I had this almost metaphorical, okay, I get it now, and that's a hill I'm willing to die on. I'll sit here and I'll film YouTube videos every day, and when the time comes, I grab a megaphone and walk downtown and scream it through a megaphone. And then if I ever had to show up in some picket line because they wanted to ban everything and take everything from everyone, I would be there, because it isn't about me. It has nothing to do with me. When I pick myself back up, I think the most important thing wasn't recognizing the strength only in myself, but feeling that I know for a fact that there are people that have no ability to pick themselves back up. And a lot of those people, they have more to offer, they have more talent, they have more skill or more need than I do. And they're not ever going to have that opportunity. They're going to chase that proverbial freedom to just enjoy life and have that white picket fence or even be able to access basics of human decency. They're going to chase that their entire lives, and they're going to be told that it's their fault and that they don't understand finance. We just saw a story about a week ago with Jack Dorsey and Jay-Z starting that Bitcoin academy up in the Bronx, I think it was, or Marcy or somewhere around there. And on Coinbase, of all places, one of the most disingenuous informational platforms out there. They always post these stories and put different things out. They're talking about how regulators are upset because they're afraid that teaching people to invest in Bitcoin and also providing them free Wi-Fi and technology to access the internet in a very poor part of a city that's already almost unlivable because of all the increases in rent and in prices, that, oh, the investor is going to lose money. They don't have anything. They have nothing to lose, and they're offering to educate them in a class that is free, and people have an issue with that. For me, I will sit here and I would do a marathon until the next bull run in 2024 if that's what it took to sit here and say that's wrong. It's wrong on a fundamental level, and I would give back every cent that I've ever made in this market if I had to, try and pretend like it wasn't. I would. It's not about that. It's about everyone else around us making this network of being able to support ourselves and those around us as viable as possible.
So what do you think, how do you think cryptocurrency is going to solve some of these problems?
So it depends. If you're looking at some traditional problems, it won't. I feel like part of what I have to digest myself every single day, and I've actually gone to therapy over this. Someone that tends to be very stubborn and proud about figuring things out myself. I actually gone to therapy, and I think that it's more or less I feel guilt because even if cryptocurrency and decentralization and immutability of chains or incorruptibility is there, the majority of people are still going to suffer because this major economic juggernaut of a system that has been going, especially for the last 5 decades, completely out of control. When it goes, most people they're still not going to have the education. They might go back and watch our videos 10 years from now and finally start to figure it out or see that they were misled in certain ways. But for the majority of people, they're going to find out or learn or access it too late. So I first have to get that out of the way because I think it's a very real reality that we're going to face, that we're not going to be able to help everyone. And if that's your goal, it's probably something that you wrestle with as well. And I know even myself, my bank in my hometown, it's one of the top 5-6 banks in the country. They froze my account back in early 2017 for dealing in digital assets and then for my protection multiple times. And yet they're partnering up and setting up their crypto desks as well, because it's not about money. It isn't about protecting the investor. It's about the control over the things that you could do with it. So what do I think crypto can solve? Well, it depends. So if crypto is truly in nature decentralized, which I believe, I myself, I spend a lot of time in Cardano, and I believe Bitcoin being the standard of decentralization to where the most populous country on earth could ban it. And then we're right back to the same hash rate and the same sort of security that we have. Decentralized networks that cannot be 51% attacked, they can't be halted, they can't be shut down. No one's hacking into your wallet. You're not breaking things, even from the founders or the money that was in there to produce it in the first place. I'll give one example, and I think that even people listening, it's probably something that they might have seen over the course of last year. So around September, right around even when we got smart contracts in Cardano, a country finally announced that Bitcoin was legal tender in El Salvador. Now, El Salvador, in making Bitcoin legal tender, not only was threatened essentially by the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, that if they made Bitcoin legal tender, they would withhold about $1.3 billion worth of aid that their population sorely needed. Being the World Bank, they're like, oh, we just won't give this to you. And they have a track record of doing this, including forcing Argentina to ban Bitcoin when they were going to make it legal tender, or else they were going to fine them or withhold billions of dollars. But El Salvador makes Bitcoin legal tender. And of course, you see Bitcoin that day it went live. I believe it was September 9th, but I might be a day or two off. At that time, Bitcoin dropped from like 52K to 40K at that day. And I believe it was a statement based on derivatives and options that people were trading at the time. And they just, beat that down. They were like, oh, look, haha, you're dumb and this is going to fail. But El Salvador has about, I believe the statistic was, and it might have changed since 2020 when they were first discussing it, but about 2 million El Salvadorian American citizens. And they send a ton of money home from working in the States legally, and they have to pay remittance fees of up to 20% through companies like Western Union. Now, them making Bitcoin legal tender in and of itself, if you talk about just sending money, the most basic function of finance in general, they lose not only the taxes that they pay in the state that they're in, or capital gains, or anything else that they might be making money in, but then an additional 20% skimmed off top of a company that does nothing but stands in the way and takes some off and moves it. Companies like that just consolidate all this money and scoop it in from other people. And then they sit there and they're like, oh, this is too dangerous. We can't let people into crypto because it's too volatile. It's not only asinine, but it's insulting to every other person that's showing up to work to send money home or to make a living, and then have it just completely picked apart from every single angle. And then even the initial taxes that you're paying, to the government, it's just going barely to pay the interest to cover the amount of debt that we sold to other countries, up to $7 trillion over the last decade. The more you know about it, you just completely see, okay, this is broken. But if I could send you money for what you provide, and if you can send me money for what I provide, that is it. That's all you need. You need to be able to provide value to the people around you, and they need to be able to pay you without being stopped, because a larger person can't kick them in the face and then make you pay them 3 times more for some inferior service.
No, and that's a really, I think the two big things that are cool about crypto is, one, the decentralization, and two, just the globalization. Because even at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about the US dollar and, how they stopped backing it with gold. And then all of a sudden, they can just print more. And now a bunch of people in that country are reliant on a government that might not have their best interest in mind to basically control their finances, and their finances control the other aspects of their life. So like the cool thing about having cryptocurrency, the cool thing about Bitcoin, for example, is you can have countries that have super corrupt governments, or countries that don't have a currency that's doing very well or experiencing hyperinflation. And you can now say, hey, there's another alternative here. There's another option. We can put the power of finances back into the hands of people. And what's really cool about the decentralized aspect, it's like, hey, it's not like you can just shut this down. Like, there are people all across. It's not like Solana or something. They can just turn it on and off. But it's like, because of the decentralized aspect, it's like they can't stop it. And you'll have like China like ban Bitcoin and stuff. But there's always, the thing is they can't shut it down. And I think that's why a lot of countries like the US are a little wary of Bitcoin, because it kind of endangers the fiat manipulative system that most countries have right now.
Yep. And by most countries, even the US, even being from here, I can admit, at least in my opinion, that we're the main antagonist of those monetary issues, because it's our currency that was agreed upon after World War II that was going to be the Federal Reserve backed by gold. And not only is it not, because we decoupled that in 1971 to pay for the debt from the Vietnam War, but then we never recoupled it back. And then we continue to print more and more money. And then gold in and of itself, when people talk about that, JP Morgan paid almost $1 billion fine in September of 2020 for manipulating precious metals markets. Because if I have a brick of gold in my safe and I sell it to you and you don't have it and I give you a certificate, then I'll sell it to 5 other people and give them certificates too. It's just another type of derivative that then dilutes some certain type of market. And then we just go and dig more of it up, and you're not really getting any sort of sound structure to it. So for us, when we're looking at these different applications, you mentioned Solana, and I saw someone comment about Solana as well. One, I want to clarify, I'm not a maxi of any particular coin. I mean, I had all my Bitcoin long ago locked away in a hard wallet. I spend most of my time within the Cardano ecosystem. I do own some Ethereum. I have Ethereum NFTs. I have multiple different cryptocurrencies. I have helium miners in my house in different parts of the city. But what I can't support is lack of decentralization. Because outside of speed, outside of security or access or affordability, decentralization is the only premise that makes blockchain work. If you take that away and you have, let's say, Solana, and I saw someone bragging, 3,000 transactions per second. Visa does 15,000 transactions per second. You know why? Because all of their systems are crammed into one location, and their board of directors makes decisions, and they turn things on and off whenever they want. And they're the same people that shut my debit card down back when I was first getting into the crypto market. And Solana has been shut down, I think, like 7 or 8 times this year. And I saw that they put through a vote that was completely lopsided and fraudulent, that to request $170 million worth of Solana from a whale to cover margin debt that's probably leveraged up in their systems. Because just like Luna or Celsius or 3AC, they're all leveraged up, promising yield to get them in, because they're built by venture capitals to take advantage of the hype and FOMO, and then to pivot it back to something like Bitcoin or put it back into their own companies. So for me, it's more about decentralization than anything. And a lot of people have serious issues with me bringing that up. And especially with all my friends in Ethereum, because I have plenty and I participate in that network as well. But I tell them, if tomorrow I learned that there was some fundamental flaw in Cardano and I just thought it was completely unviable from a decentralized standpoint, I would pivot and move that day. That is my line in the sand, and that's the most important thing to me. And I feel like Ethereum, being every venture capitalist's favorite place to build a business, they've been in it for years and years, including Visa, that still plans to start a cryptocurrency stablecoin bank with USDC. They've really went heavy into Ethereum, and of course they're going to stake it. And those ones that didn't stake with someone like Celsius to get 8 or 9% rewards and got completely liquidated because of all the derivatives from Lido and STE, then they're locked up in Ethereum and they can't pull it. And then they're all waiting on Ethereum 2.0. And when that is cleared, it is simply just Cardano, but more expensive. That's all it is. And it's a truth that people need to eventually come to terms with, or come up with a better argument than you're gatekeeping or you're spreading FUD. It's not. Explain to me why this makes more sense, not for you, but for the majority of people, because that's whose corner I'm going to sit in. I don't give a shit if you're a venture capitalist and you're like, I could get a higher ROI on Avalanche. I don't care. I'm looking at it in the broader scheme of the most amount of people that can be helped over the span of time, that is safe, affordable, secure, fast, decentralized. That's it. Everything else, every other dollar I can make is outside of the entire, equation. So I'm not sure if that directly answers your question. I know I tend to just talk a lot, but
no, it's crazy. And once again, there's a lot of overlap with different things that I've been thinking about. It's very relatable, a lot of the things you were saying. Because even I think like 2-3 weeks ago, I once again made a tweet saying if a cryptocurrency is super centralized, it's forgetting the whole point of what crypto's about. It's about this decentralized aspect of not having the power of finances in an individual or a small collective of individuals that might not have your best interest. Like it's this whole aspect of being able to have a bunch of people be able to be in control of the decisions, having these decisions in the hands of people through different voting and staking and things like that. Like when you really break it down, like what the hell is the point of cryptocurrency? Like what is the point of cryptocurrency? Like I can go on Solana right now. I could buy a bunch of NFTs. I could sell NFTs. I can make money from it. Maybe I can go into different farms and do DeFi, get into the DeFi sector, and I get coins as a reward, and I make some passive income from that. But it's like, what's really the at the end of the day, what's the point of cryptocurrency? And for me, it's like one of the core points is the decentralized aspect of not having, we don't want a US dollar 2.0 where it's like, okay, now all of a sudden, this group of people that control it can say, okay, we're shutting this down, we're turning this on, we're doing this, we're doing this. And I think it's like you see that with Binance Smart Chain too. And like Binance Smart Chain, they like blew up really quick because they were one of the main chains that allowed a lot of meme coins to come in, and just they allowed DeFi, and it was relatively cheap and it was fast, but it was super centralized, right? And I think like if you think of like cryptocurrency in the long term, like you need a good mix of things. But if you're prioritizing speed and lower cost by taking away the decentralized aspect, then it's like, for me, it's like, what the hell is the point of this? Yeah. And I guess like the question I have for you is like, what do you think the point of cryptocurrency is? Like, what do you think the point of it is?
So I think that I can answer that, at least from my perspective. And once Cardano fully gets situated with Hydra and everything else, that whole transaction per second conversation or utility of that, or the accessibility of it, that debate will be a thing of the past. But right now we're in a transitionary period. So sort of a two-part thing. One, just to play on what we've been talking about initially, it's cryptocurrency in and of itself. I view one ADA or one Cardano as one ADA and one Cardano. I was buying it down in the pennies. I think my biggest large buy was like around 8-9 cents when I was dumping stuff in. And I bought it all the way up to $1. And then I did a bunch of NFT stuff, over the last 15 months, and I'm still buying it today. It is one ADA is one ADA to me. We're in a transitionary period where in order for me to buy that, I have to use US dollars. Now, if the US dollar burned up and ceased to exist today, we could still trade in Cardano. Its value in and of itself is denoted in US dollars, and that's how people view it. And that's its value, because they still have to onboard, because the majority of people have yet to enter this market. So the price in and of itself is inconsequential over the course of the long term. More or less, it has to do with people's ability to onboard and set their systems or their base up or their individual lives up within Web3. That is more or less the debate that people need to focus on, outside of just what the price of a coin is or things like that. When it comes to decentralization or what can we fix, one of the biggest issues I have with macroeconomics, or when we talk about, okay, even very intelligent people, and he had a viral video on it, Ray Dalio behind Bridgewater Capital, which is the world's largest hedge fund. He talks about historical fiat currencies failing, or just historical empires failing, right? And it goes from the Dutch to the British to us. And now eventually people assume it will be China and the digital yuan that they have, which is still an infinitely printable CBDC fiat currency. The problem is, in the past, let's say if the British Empire collapses. So if I live on the other side of the world, it's going to take weeks, if not months, for me to learn about that. It's going to take years for it to affect my supply in business or how I operate. Right now, if one person says one thing on the other side of the world, if Jerome Powell comes out and says an additional, 25 basis points in his meeting about the Fed, the entire world shifts. And that information is like a lightning bolt and moves across every network to everyone, especially those that move markets. And at the same time, if something like the US dollar failed, which we will fight physically with everything that we have to make sure that it won't as a nation, because that's what every country or empire or power has done since the history of time, even though there's 100% fail rate for fiat currencies. But typically, if something failed or if you got to pivot or do something, then you go somewhere else. Oh, here's this land that we haven't found. Let's go conquer this. Or here's this new advancement or thing that we could have that will help us expand further than we have. We have already connected every form of communication. We see everyone everywhere. There's a camera in everyone's pocket. We can't expand anywhere. We can't take anything on an ethical standpoint. And there's more people than not that would stand to say that it wouldn't be right if we did. So we have now hit both a moral and volume impasse as to how else we could expand aside from completely imploding if this fails. And we have more arsenal and ways to hurt each other more quickly than we ever have right now, today. So if we do not put in a system that benefits the 7-some billion people on this planet, then we're going to wind up getting entangled in that whole thing in physics, Fermi's paradox. Any civilization that hits a point where they have enough power to start to prepare to leave their planet, they'll wipe themselves out before they get there. Well, I don't think Elon Musk is racing to get to Mars along with every other billionaire that doesn't know what to do with their money, even if they might not care. We're getting to that stage where we've expanded as far as we can expand, and we're looking up, and we have every ability and capability to go out and to either help people or destroy them all at once in a day. So as this system fails, if we hand it off to another system, it's like an overloaded reactor. It's just going to explode. And if you see some of the things that are going on there and the authoritarian system that allowed them to get there, or the human rights violations in some of the southwest parts of China, I don't think a lot of people would be, subject to accepting a social credit system. I don't think that people would appreciate some of the economic things that they do. And it's not like you can tell me something and I can't pull this supercomputer out of my pocket and research what's actually happening. So you're not going to be able to mislead people at that point. So everyone's just exhausted, desperate, tired, pissed off, and frustrated. And especially after this last crash, everyone's sitting here and saying, what the hell do we do now? Because everything that I was told, including, oh, we're going to have a soft landing, we're going to build back better, we're going to help this other country, we're going to provide aid, we're going to pick you up, we're going to forgive student loans. It was all a lie. And it's not coming tomorrow or next year with the next president or anything with our government or otherwise. So do we all give up, or do we find a better way to do it? And that's why blockchain in and of itself and the concept of decentralization is inherently where all of the value in cryptocurrency lies. Without it, it is just another derivative of fiat currency in one way or another that will eventually implode in on itself. So when I talk about those things, I truly, truly believe that, not only in my own eyes and with my own education or my own experience, but historically, every single thing denotes that same thing. And I can't trust one small board of directors at some company or one house full of representatives that paid their way into office through political favors, lobbying, and being born wealthy. They're going to all come together and give up their wealth to put a system in place so that we don't have to pay them for existing.
Wow. I think wow is the only word I could say. Dude, you need to go on Joe Rogan or something and talk about this, man. This is nuts. I love it. This is the deepest I've thought to date on an interview that I've been doing like this.
Well, hey, at least we're doing it live, right?
Yeah, there's so much to dissect there. So essentially what you were saying is that historically fiat is just not going to work. And usually, when we get to that point, whether it's the Romans or whatever the case is, you see a select few making decisions that benefit them, and then eventually it gets to the point where it kind of just implodes on itself. And usually the solution was okay, we'll conquer another place, we'll expand, we'll reset, kind of thing. So do you essentially believe that this is eventually going to happen to the US dollar in some standpoint, and that the answer this time is going to be cryptocurrency?
Yep. And to clarify, again, I'll say it a couple times because it's hour and a half show. It's never financial advice, but I think even intelligent people that tend to troll everyone from their investors to the majority of us on Twitter, all the way to the SEC and Elon Musk, he isn't an idiot. And his first sort of now ominous tweet, Bitcoin is inevitable. I think that he truly believed that in the billions of dollars that he put into that. He understands that that's kind of where that's going. And we've had plenty of senators, especially more Republican or conservative based senators, start leaning into cryptocurrency. You see it a lot in like the middle of at least the United States, especially Texas, Wyoming, Colorado, places like that, and even in certain parts of Florida, as opposed to more liberal areas like New York or California, in those locations. Now, inherently, I am not political. I didn't vote in the last election because I just came to the assumption that no matter who's put in there, these things will unfold regardless of who is in office, because there are things in place. No matter what you do or how you do them, you're not going to be able to stall out what's already in motion, because every solution that you have is going to exacerbate the problem. So for cryptocurrency, let's even say to the point of every problem that we have, from inflation, increasing interest rates, supply chain problems, being able to find a solution other than UBI for people that can't afford a living and things like that. Uh, Governors or Senate members, people like Senator Loomis, who I'm super familiar with just because she is from around the same area of the country as Charles, being from, I believe, Wyoming, but also just understanding blockchain in general. If you took something that is expansatory and deflationary like Bitcoin, that every Bitcoin can break down to 100 million Satoshis, and you start to absorb some of that toxic debt and derivatives in all of this, stuff that is just loans that will never be repaid, that will just stack up and break every single system more by the day. If it starts to absorb that and put true value back into people's pockets in a way to then translate that into a functional economy where I can pay you for the things that you do, as opposed to try and sell you something you don't need so I can afford my increasing rent, it then trickles down to everyone else within a functional economy. And if our currency is then backed by something that now would be Bitcoin as opposed to gold, which was already not only decoupled, but also fraudulently, sold by major banks that also called Bitcoin a fraud. Now Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan thinks that Bitcoin's undervalued. They're playing both sides of the fence, and they're making money both ways based on people's perception of those markets. You put that behind there, and you start to reverse the effects with the way that Bitcoin operates, that we have thrust upon all these other countries whose currencies, if you think ours is bad, inflation in some countries is in the teens, in the 20s. Their currencies are collapsing because they're valuated in US dollars that we are printing. And for anyone that's listening, or if you think about, how would us printing money affect other countries beyond our own inflation? Think about like the Turkish lira. So in Turkey, they took out a bunch of loans, but they took them in US dollars. Now, when they pay those loans, they have to pay them in United States dollars. They have to pay them in that currency. Now, if we have loans, then we just print money, right? Oh, we have loans, we'll just print money and pay the interest. If they have to pay that in US dollars, they can't print it. So we are essentially just dead stopping every single economy around the world in this incredibly dangerous hyper version of stagflation, which just means slow economic growth and inflation. So we're destroying all these other currencies. But if we back it by something that can then expand and absorb a lot of that debt and a lot of that inflation, we begin to heal that process. And by extension, whether it's Bitcoin or more transactory layer ones like Cardano, you still have, 71% of the world's population that doesn't have access to internet, at least by 2019 statistics. And I'm assuming they haven't really built more infrastructure for that since the pandemic started. You have 1.4, 1.5 billion people around the world that don't even have access to financial services. Even us being a first world country, we don't even have financial literacy. It's not even taught, because if you start to understand it, then you might do okay. it begins to fix a lot of those systemic problems that then lead back into every political debate, every conflict that we have, every position fighting. It all stems back to being socioeconomic because there's 7.5 billion people around the world fighting over things that they believe in that are inherently untrue and created by a very small percentage of bad actors that collude through the economic or the World Economic Forum and the IMF and these large intercontinental bodies that govern the decisions that we make. And as things get worse, they shift the blame onto you. You start to correct all those different problems over the course of time. And if you don't, then we'll have to face the brunt of the consequences of all of those things because they certainly won't. And to kind of tie back in and then to hear your thoughts, you know, the main issue right now with price and cryptocurrency, and it's dropping, and we're not sure why. The SEC has made it very clear since early 2021 when people started putting forth their proposals that they weren't going to clear a spot ETF for Bitcoin or any type of cryptocurrency. For anyone listening, that just means that if you own a massive asset firm or a hedge fund, and you're managing people's money, you cannot hold that asset unless it is in a spot ETF. However, they did clear multiple futures ETFs. SEC loves futures for Bitcoin. So I could buy, if I had a lot of money, I could buy a bunch of shorts on any cryptocurrency that is available to buy with futures or options. I could short it with leverage and bury that with every dollar that I just printed, that only a fraction of it went to you in your stimulus checks. And we shoved it all into the stock market and shorted crypto into the ground, even though we don't even have exposure to the assets. We make money on the short all the way down, and then we take all of our profits and then we flip it directly back into buying those same assets, setting up our crypto desks for our wealth management clients at places like Goldman Sachs, where unless you have $5 million, you didn't have access to be able to invest in cryptocurrency because they think it's too dangerous because you're too poor. And then in the meantime, they don't pay taxes on any of that because they take out another $1 billion loan. And they say, well, yeah, we had a $1 billion profit, $1 billion loan, which is essentially debt. We're at break even. And then they throw that back in and they short the market again. And they're just going to exhaust people over and over again. So if you understand that principle of how these markets work, not in the news, not on Jim Cramer's show, on, Smart Money or whatever they break down, if you understand the way that the markets are reacting, you can begin to protect yourself and to accumulate safe positions and react accordingly to where the stress isn't going to kill you. You're not going to get eaten alive. You're not going to be liquidated and so on. So at the end of the day, you doing what you do or me doing what I'm doing in that educational standpoint, it is absolutely crucial that we show up every single day. And it's not about making money. It's about, it's sometimes I even say to whether it's my girlfriend or my parents, some days I don't even want to do this. I don't even want, like, I'm embarrassed that I have to do this sometimes, but I'm compelled to do it anyway because it's something that needs to be done. I see both the light and the dark in all the things that we do, and it's my job to amplify the light.
Now, to kind of go off of that, what sort of outcome were you thinking with cryptocurrency? Because at one point you were saying that, like, do you essentially think that we're going to continue to have the US dollar, but we're going to use different cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin and Cardano to kind of back it like we did gold? Or do you see us fully transitioning into these different layer ones, like let's say Cardano as like our new, form of currency? Like, where do you see that going? Because I think right now too, there's a lot of uncertainty with which layer ones are even going to be around. Obviously, Bitcoin isn't a great transactional blockchain by any means. A lot of these cryptocurrencies are capped in their max supply as well, Cardano included. So it's one of those things where, if we really start on a large government scale to adopt, ADA, for example, rather than $1, and now we're capped with ADA, wouldn't the price of ADA just get way too high at some point as well? Like what exactly do you see with this? Because I almost think that there does have to be, like, do you think there's a world where you can have a capped supply in something, like a capped amount of US dollars? Like, do you think that's something doable? Or do you, like, yeah, because...
So I want you to finish first, and then I have a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's like the population is constantly growing. The demand for a lot of these different items are constantly growing as well. I guess it's like maybe I'm just brainwashed with the aspect like you need to print some money. I don't know, man. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So
Like,
I have multiple thoughts on that. And real quick, I just wanted to respond to the one comment about the correlation with the NASDAQ and the S&P. So just to highlight what I was saying earlier, they're not trading Bitcoin, right? On exchanges, for the most part, it's almost at its bear market 2018 low as of last week. They're not selling the asset. They're buying the asset. They're shorting the futures and options contracts. So everyone in those larger markets can treat it like a speculative tech stock with no exposure to the true asset and say, "Oh, look at all the correlation," when realistically it has nothing to do with it, and it's just making a complete mockery of what the fundamentals of decentralization are, and it's scaring people out of the market. Now, as far as having a cap supply, so, and also, if you can still hear me, let me know because I saw I was lagging a bit on the
I can,
video.
I can.
Okay, perfect. So, for an asset that is not only deflationary but it's expansatory, what that means is when I pay you for something, whether I owe you one Cardano or one Bitcoin, whether Bitcoin was back at its all-time low, under $1 when people were buying it, or whether it was at $69,000 at its all-time high, I don't have to pay you in one Bitcoin. I've seen people say, "Oh, there's only 21 million." And with 7 billion people on the planet, there's no way that you could have that represent all of these different assets and all these different transactions. But then when you take 21 million and you multiply it by 100 million, those are a lot of units of value. And the same thing is true with Cardano, even having, I believe, 34 billion circulating supply right now, or a lot of, I think, what, 73.6% of it is staked. Even with that being said, you can still fractionalize Cardano. And if I ever owed someone 0.002 Cardano, I could pay them that. It's more a unit of measurement of what I owe you, not that I need a full Cardano to functionally activate whatever protocol that I'm using. So you can have expansatory systems to where they can still hold their value. And in order to have it be decentralized, which is the only thing that inherently gives blockchain its value, you have to, with no exceptions, have a cap supply. Because if you don't, then you are no better than any fiat currency that has failed before you. And with the US dollar, if it doesn't accept Bitcoin or some decentralized version of asset to back it, it doesn't inherently have to die. And I'm not just solely anti-government. I'm anti-stupidity and corruption. So for them, like, if you don't back it, it will fail. With 100% track record historically, every fiat currency fails. And when this one fails, this is the first time that we've had a single currency back 7 billion people in all these countries in an instantaneous market that reacts so volatilely, or with such volatility. When those things react, it would be catastrophic when that fails. And yes, people in crypto will be okay. And I'm sure crypto prices, even then, would probably hit a quick slump, but I still need to show up and live a life, and you still might want to do something instead of roll over and disappear. So I need a way to pay you, and I'm not going to be able to do that with no way of transacting. Now, in the past, when these previous fiat currencies have failed, it takes an extensive amount of time for the full repercussions and consequences of those economic things that transpire to unfold. Right now, it happens instantly, globally, on a market that's 24/7 that doesn't move. And even when the stock market or S&P and Nasdaq are closed, they're all constantly talking to each other and colluding. And even to tie it all the way back to the start of our conversation about GameStop, the whole reason why people took that stance and threw all their money in and lost all their money through the corruption was to prove a point that these large organizations were communicating and insider trading and colluding against the average citizens that were attempting to invest in things that they believed in. So without a cap supply, it cannot work. And with any interference with that, it becomes no better than every derivative of fiat currency prior. Now, I do think that there are issues when it comes to distribution, because even though they relate to the game, the banks right now, especially even why I think Elon Musk kind of did a little backtrack last, May and June when he was being super negative towards crypto. A lot of his large investors, and one of his biggest, especially in SpaceX and some of his companies, is BlackRock, where I mentioned Ray Dalio and Bridgewater being the largest hedge fund. That's the largest asset manager in the world, managing like $10.5 trillion worth of assets. And during that time, from May to July, they increased their crypto positions just under 300% across either the actual assets or stock and mining companies, including Marathon Mining, that went public that a lot of people were buying. So it's not about what people say, it's about what they're doing. But ultimately, they understand that it doesn't matter how much money they have. We'll print infinite money. They have $10 trillion of assets under management. And they have pull in every political system and jurisdictional system on the planet. And they're buying it because it doesn't matter how much money you have if it becomes valueless, because that fiat system dissipates into dust. So we're all trying to figure out how to transition while measuring it with the scale of a different failing fiat currency on a larger scale than has ever transitioned in the past, and all trying to communicate about where that value is while being desperate at the same time to keep your head above water, to find enough money to invest enough to stabilize yourself. So it's a complete, clusterfuck in different directions of how are you supposed to navigate this as an individual. And, I'll tie it back in, even though answering your question about a cap supply, I'll continue to reiterate, this is why it's important from an unbiased standpoint, from a selfless standpoint, from a transparent standpoint. It's important that you do what you do. And it's important that anyone that goes out there and says anything on a daily basis about this market, it's pivotal to everyone else around us, including ourselves. So it isn't about the money, because if we fail and if this fails, then we're not going to have any anyway. So you might as well just do things for the right reasons and make sure they work. And then every other unintentional benefit at the end of the day could be your reward for being a person that isn't going to stand for every broken thing that you were raised with.
So my question to kind of go off of that would be, why wouldn't the US make their own digital currency kind of like China did? Like, would you have a problem if they made their own currency if they capped it? Because like part of the problem is right now, if you look at some of these currencies, like you have major whales sometimes that own a large amount of the supply. If you look at things like Solana, I mean, I think like something like over 30% of it was venture capitalists. Like,
Yep.
If you're the US government, like, do you think instead of them trying to, use a coin out there such as Cardano to back the dollar or something, like, do you think it would be a problem if they just made their own? And
Yep.
they said, hey, we're going to cap this out and we're going to try to make this decentralized?
It's a good question. So it isn't just about the cap. Having a capped currency supply isn't the definition of decentralized. Decentralized is having a distributed amount of currency or functionality within a currency in the crypto world, to where if everyone came together, very large bodies, heavy whales, people with money, and they attempted to say, you know what, I know that we said we were going to cap it, just like you hear today, we said soft landing. It's the same shit, but we're going to make more. It was capped. If they have it all, or if they created that system, they're just going to then create more of it whenever it benefits themselves or when they get caught in a bind. And that's the first thing we did. The moment we decoupled from gold in 1971, we just printed money. We'd never stopped, because it's a flaw of human nature to solve problems with an infinite solution that benefits the people that make the decision without thinking about how it affects everyone that they'll never meet or see or think about in their entire life. So even if they made a CBDC or a central bank digital currency and they capped it, they would just change it. At the first sign of trouble, or when things got hard, or when they wanted more, they would change it. Bitcoin only works because it is fully decentralized. And it can't be 51% attacked because it was so split up and so broken up between people that ledger and its locations and the miners that support the network through proof of work are so spread out that short of a nuclear fallout EMP that shuts down all electrical impulses in the world, you're not going to get 51% of that network that goes back and they could change transactions or shut down the network or pause things. Now, if you think about banks when they really hated Bitcoin throughout, I'd call it like the genuine hate era, late 2009. They probably didn't even know about it then. It really started around like 2011, all the way up to about 2017. They despised it and they wanted to kill it. And all those initial meetings up in New York with the attorney general about cryptocurrency and trying to ban it, and why New York is still such a terrible place to try and be in the crypto market because there's so much regulatory bullshit around it. They tried to kill it and they couldn't. So now they want to adopt it, and they want to make sure that even though it ceases to, give them any reason to exist, like they every middleman, every bank, every connector, every money mover, they have no reason to exist because I could do it from me to you. So they have to establish as much of a position as they can so that every impoverished person that they misled with misinformation has to come to them to enroll in some 1,000 Satoshi Bitcoin program in 2026, because it becomes so undeniably, palpable that the US dollar is failing and inflation didn't fix itself, that they're going to be the quote unquote good guys that will help educate and onboard people. When just years ago, they were misleading people and, trying to get them to not get into that market. So China, with their digital yuan and CBDC, it's an infinitely printable digital fiat currency. There is no difference with it. And it doesn't matter if it's capped. And with Solana and those venture capitalists, it's the same problem. If they created that and they could put out all the information to say how beneficial it was, all the way back to Coinbase that I said has an incredibly corrupt way of reporting the news, even on their application. They were like, oh, is Solana the next Visa? I was like, no, Solana is Visa. Solana is fast because it is centralized. It is so easy to have fast and affordable transactions when it is a single entity behind it that is throughputing those transactions. But when it comes to creating a distributed ledger that is decentralized, immutable, and incorruptible, and then to scale it and make it fast, all of a sudden you get titled a ghost chain, or you get titled a fraud like Bitcoin was, or, it's vaporware like Cardano. The ones that got the most hate from every organization or every loudest influencer or most influential people, those are the ones that are the most important time after time. And that's why they shine through in the most volatile times, because those same big venture capitalists pull their money and put it there.
So I have two questions too off of that. So the first question would be, how would a transition to being backed by Bitcoin take place? How would that look? How would that be executed? And then the second thing is, I know that you've been speaking a lot about Cardano, but are there any other layer ones that you think have a lot of potential as well due to their decentralization?
So I would say one, how would that transition occur? I inherently, personally, don't believe that it will. I think that we are too corrupt and too far gone that all of our politicians would rather burn everything to the ground. And that's what we're seeing now, where every irrational decision that's ramping the heat up and making every bad thing happen at once, where, even if you know what's happening, you wake up and you're scratching your head like, oh, well, it can't get worse. And somehow it does. We're breaking down every system right now. I think that this is a massive everything bubble that went in November of last year that is just starting to unravel. And they've already set up their positions, and they're going to leave everyone out to dry and then try and convince them not to burn down the country or countries, depending on where you're at, and to also come to them to use a completely personal, banking infrastructure that you don't need them for. If it was to transition that way, which I don't believe that it will, I couldn't even answer how it would happen. Because at the speed that government moves and the average age and ineptitude of them when it comes to anything digital, I don't think we would ever come to some sort of consensus as to how to transition until we were all either completely starving to death or they just got so old they couldn't hold office anymore. That's my honest opinion. And then as far as cryptocurrencies that I believe in outside of Cardano, anything that is decentralized, that has a good footing in that sort of immutable, incorruptible way, I will put my focus on. I don't like the majority of major cryptos. Actually, I hate almost every cryptocurrency, which is ironic because I work in this
Yeah.
space. But Bitcoin and Cardano are my two by a long shot. I do like the concepts of things like Helium, where it's a mesh network that essentially establishes ways to communicate or
I,
provide.
I have some helium miners too, actually.
There we go. So if you think about decentralization, everyone with a helium miner, you're distributing that network and that currency or that signal, and you're distributing that token, and it is capped at that point. So, although the rewards have been cut down over the course of the past couple of years that they've been running, I think that over time, if they do things right or update correctly, they could be successful. I more or less like them because I think the concept of a mesh network is incredibly important. And whether it's World Mobile Token on Cardano or anyone that might try and put in some sort of decentralized infrastructure to how we share information or transact with these currencies, I think it's going to be crucial. Because one of the biggest pushbacks I get from people are they're like, well, what if the government can't stop it, so they shut down the internet? Because they have a certain type of pull over the major internet providers that are all essentially just massive conglomerates that own the entire market. Well, we have to be able to establish it ourselves. And I think that although sometimes people view him as the antagonist for various reasons, people like Elon Musk with the potential to create something like Starlink, which is a private satellite system that can provide things like internet, even in times of war. Like we saw him dedicate those satellites over to the Ukraine and try and establish some sort of internet infrastructure there. That's going to be a whole different battle that's going to have to be fought. So I like helium currently, but long term, I don't know. But I still own them and I still have the currency, and I support the idea of a mesh network. I like the idea initially of Polkadot in their parachains and having a layer 0 and then having external chains built on top of it. However, I think that it's going to ship a little too late, and they're not doing anything in my eyes that's better than Cardano. So for them, although I like Polkadot and I believe his name is Jeremy Wood, the guy that created it, who was also part of the Ethereum team with Hoskinson and Vitalik. I just don't see the necessity to invest in something that is an inferior version of something that will work better or already does work better. And people might say, oh, well, why do you like Cardano? Because Ethereum has DeFi. And that's because I don't want to put half of my yearly salary into NFT transactions to even be able to use it. And I know the majority of people can't even afford to participate in the network. And 2.0 is essentially a discount version of proof of stake that Cardano put in place that Hoskinson built when he left Ethereum, and all that money and potential on the table because he just said this isn't going to work. It's the same sort of idea where people were saying Litecoin was the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Why? Why would Litecoin be the silver to Bitcoin's gold when it does the exact same thing in an inferior way, in a less decentralized way? If Bitcoin can expand and you can use it the same way, Litecoin doesn't provide any value. Oh, it's a little bit cheaper to transact. Give it a couple years and let Lightning Network really take root and all these massive different companies trying to put that infrastructure in place. It's going to completely eliminate the need to have any type of inferior version of something to put it in outside of speculation. I could speculate how much value it could have, and then I can make a YouTube video about it and tell all my followers about what price I think Litecoin is going to go to. And then I could push my, fraudulent NFT project and pump 5 random meme coins and make more money in a month than people will make in a decade by providing misinformation. And I think that goes back to the whole idea that we started off talking about, where we're looking at all this different information. What do you believe in, or these different items? No one can say for certain, But I know for a fact that with the knowledge that we have, we could make far more money if we misled people than if we didn't. It would be so easy because people don't have that information. And it does take a certain type of individual, either through life, events, circumstances, personal conviction to the point of stubborn, almost psychotic levels. But like those different items do matter. And you're not going to flip on a video and hear about some of these large protocols and hear people just say hard line, this doesn't make sense to me. They'll talk about every capability that they promise, every possible functionality, but there's no real outcome outside of just covering something that doesn't matter. And like in the past, I've made videos talking about them or different blockchains because I knew people would research them, but it isn't about the value of them. It's just how do they work? And then, although I got a little off track, the only other one that I would probably give a little focus to, and it's tough because although I don't believe that they're as decentralized as the positions that I want to be in over the course of time, I think that their software and how they promote interconnected blockchains, it's going to be needed.
Which one are you talking about?
Cosmos.
Cosmos, okay.
So I think Cosmos as a blockchain, I don't have any inherent issues with them, but I would caution everyone again, it's more or less about potential at that point. It isn't about principle functionality in full on like, okay, this makes sense to me. I think that their tech and their SDK, tools that allow people to build blockchains, like they were parts of teams that helped set up the infrastructure to Luna Terra. And what they did with that and Anchor Protocol and all that leverage and stuff, we saw how that wound up. So that wasn't inherently Cosmos's fault, but they have the tech to create that infrastructure. When I really started digging deep into Cosmos, it wasn't until around 2020 when those early days of Binance Smart Chain were starting to be formulated. And I was like, whoa, what's Venus Protocol? Never heard of that. Like, wait, what are, these different things that I can have access to on Binance, which I don't inherently like Binance either. But in those moments, like I will still invest and make money. I won't keep it there. I'll take it and I'll put it back into things that I believe matter. They were also, their tech was used for Thor chain and their different, fundamentals of how they want to set up their dexes and aggregators. And I know Thor had issues and they had a massive, I don't think it was a hack. I think there was just like some fundamental breakdown in like mid 2021 that their blockchain had. So if they can get that right and help various true decentralized blockchains communicate even multiple years down the road, then in that case, okay, I'm interested and I'll follow them and I might invest a little bit, but I'm more or less, I'm not a Cardano maxi, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, I'm a decentralization maxi, and I'm a people maxi. And anything that falls into that category is going to get my full attention and the weight of everything I can put into it behind it.
I agree, man. And that's kind of where, I've been on a lot of chains. I've had experience on Ethereum and, AVAX and Phantom and Binance and Polygon. Like I've gone on all of these different chains. I've had experience in different ones. I've been on NFTs on Ethereum and Solana and all these places. And, ultimately I came kind of the same conclusion as you, like Cardano really felt right to me. I liked the way that they were building things. I liked the community aspect. I liked the approach. I liked the thought process that went behind it. And honestly, from all my experience in all these different chains, like I haven't experienced another chain that kind of checked off as many boxes as Cardano. And, there are still issues with, congestion, but they've been getting improved on. And I think that's one of the things that, once again, where we tie it back to the beginning, how you can take the short approach or the long approach, even when it comes to content making. Okay, do you want to shill yourself? Do you want to put 10, 20, 50x on your videos, get 10 times as many subscribers way faster, make way more money, take paid promos and do stuff like that, where, maybe over time it kind of kicks you in the butt a little bit? Or do you want to do things the slower way, but that you're building a strong foundation and one with integrity, And over time, if you're playing the long game like Cardano is, like these problems that they're experiencing on the front end, like not having smart contracts right away and all these things, like those are slowly getting tackled and solved. And kind of the last question that I had for you was, you are incredibly knowledgeable about this space. Like it is absolutely ridiculous how much you know.
Thank
How
you.
the hell does where like if someone wants to learn these things, how the hell do they do it? Like, because even me, man, I spent a lot of time in this. I'm sitting here like dumbfounded at some of it, just because there's so much information. Like, how does someone really educate themselves on this space, which was one of the problems that we were trying to tackle anyways? Like, how have you been able to educate yourself, and how were you able to find these different answers and have this knowledge, and not be exposed to some of the misinformation out there?
Good question. So I wish it was as simple as like, oh, I went to this random site that pulls all this information together and I learned it. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. For me, the things that people can't change, the one factor that I will always throw on the table that I think differentiates me from some people is I have severe ADHD. So I just am incredibly hyperactive, especially at night. And for me, a lot of my time throughout, since I can remember, all the way back to being a kid and when the internet first came out, something about being able to learn things sort of calmed down that hyperactivity in me. So I have spent more time than is probably both healthy and recommended studying different things. And that goes far beyond cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency, even back then, that was a part of it. So consuming a lot of information is the first one. Now, everyone has their own capacity, or, as Serge from Ugly Bros, who I talk to every now and then, he'll always say, everyone has their own limits. Everyone has their own 100%. If you burn yourself out, or if you try and learn too much, you're going to feel overwhelmed and you're going to make mistakes. It's going to take time. But I even have a whiteboard in a different part of my office that I wrote down, a few years ago when I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I don't care if no one listens to me. This is what I'm doing full time, and I'm going to do it until X date. I didn't put 2022 like a lot of other, YouTubers. They were like, oh, we're just going to yeet all of our money into all this, random cryptocurrency and make a ton of money and we'll ride off into the sunset. I put 2025. My foot is on that pedal until then, because I knew regardless of this cycle that it was going to take another halving for the entire macro system to play out. So it didn't really affect me in that short term with the knowledge that I had. But in order to acquire it, the number one thing that I would tell people is, for anything that you believe in, and this could apply to your political affiliations, if you're religious, if you have a favorite blockchain, it doesn't matter. Find people that tell you why you shouldn't believe it. And even if you're convicted to the point where you're educated and you understand it and it's based in factual evidence, always listen to people that attempt to discredit or break down ideas or beliefs or convictions that you have. Because what that's going to allow you to do is either A, go through that discourse with them and have conversations as to why it makes sense. And either you're going to help them and educate them, or on the other side of the coin, there might be certain things that you thought that you believed in, or that you were very convicted in, or that someone else that you trusted told you, that through that conversation, you learned that that might not be the case. There is no one in this world that is right about everything. And I have made a litany of mistakes over the course of my life attempting to learn things, especially early on when that educational material wasn't available. 2017, 2018, it was a hell of a ride. It really was. And then I showed up and I kept going and I kept digging every single day, like just nonstop. And that was it. And just accumulating that information. The next thing I would say is, when you have Twitter or Discord or Telegram or WhatsApp or YouTube and all these different things, and I see people commenting down below, it was when you are discussing these items, not only look for people to challenge your convictions and stand up and debate them and understand them enough to be able to have that conversation, but learn things beyond your convictions or the doubt they're in them about what they might have to offer. Everyone talks about cryptocurrency or Web3 and open source code and what an innovation it is because something could be public and immutable and I can build off of it. Well, I view all of our conversations almost like open source thought. You know, whether it's the project that I help run or Twitter in general, every conversation I have, I take something away from it. And it either changes a little bit of how I think, or it adds to how I think, or it increases a certain conviction in me, or it weakens maybe a position that I had. And to be able to open source as much of that as possible and learn from everyone, take all that information and then sit there and debate it and defend it and speak to it and have those conversations, you eventually, through trial and error over the course of time, will come to a conclusion across multiple people in every scenario with research where you want to position yourself. And you got to forgive yourself that it isn't going to be tomorrow. And you got to forgive yourself that it's not going to be at the end of 2022. And you can't flip on a YouTube video and have someone say Bitcoin's going to be 650K by the end of this year and believe it to be true and be upset when it isn't. There are certain things that are going to be hard. The powers that be and those that make the decisions that put us not only in this scenario, but are supposedly the people that will help us get to the next stage are not here for you. They are not going to help you. They are not going to educate you. You know, Block will, I will. If you DM me on Twitter and ask a question, if we're ever in a space and you have something, I'll help you just for free. I will be here and I will help you. Those regulatory boards and the powers that burnt everything borderline to the point of collapse, they will not help you. And they haven't, and they never will. So at this point, lean into each other, educate each other. Even those people that are commenting that, you know, obviously appreciate all the work that you've done over the course of time and will continue to do. I guarantee you I could learn something from each of them and they could probably take something away from me. Like, those are important things that we take for granted. And instead of us all screaming, we're going to make it, like, we can ensure that we can learn together. You know, we can, even if it's you and a group of friends. I had a little Telegram group just with my friends, and they would like talk about finances. And although I was incredibly jaded towards it because I disagreed with everything, they were at least coming together to try and formulate opinions on what they thought would happen. And there's a certain social power in that. So if we're back to, you know, just like Charles said, take back some of that freedom of thought and expression and connectivity, then let's lean into it and let's emulate the things that we do in this space and we want to see through ourselves and others. You know, let's not just hold our investments and speculate about price, but let's learn how to utilize them as a blockchain or company. Let's build things as opposed to watch a chart day in and day out and feel nauseous because the price isn't to the moon yet. Like, there are things every day that we can do that can contribute to our success over the course of time, our mental peace in the moment, or just our ability to then expand outward towards others and provide things well beyond education. So that would be my advice to everyone else. I know, you know, it's probably still a longer answer than what you're used to getting, but I don't think it's a simple question. And I think that it takes a lot of soul searching, personal growth, and trial and error to get there.
I love that, man. I love that. And we are wrapping up here, but before we leave, I wanted Viva, I wanted you to have a chance to kind of showcase what you've been working on. I don't know if you want to share your screen and talk about your project that you're working on and maybe your YouTube channel and your Twitter and stuff so people can follow you and stay updated to you.
Yeah, give me 1 second. And I know we went a little over our time, and I hope as long as I didn't talk your ear off too much, I would love to do this again. So The only reason I'm sharing this now for you guys is our mint in our current project ends on the 25th. Although it's not just a one-time thing or something that we're just doing for the hell of it. I'm part of the team over at Pneumonium, and we have right now about 4,100 or so people in the Discord. But it's more or less an ecosystem with eventually in the future a DAO that will be the financial engine that powers that ecosystem, and it focuses on supporting up and coming artists as opposed to being like you see a lot of organizations buying blue chip art or creating external value with hype and partnerships. More or less we want to enable community internally to create things, to start their businesses, to educate themselves, and then is a financial engine. That DAO is fully illiquid, and you put it into different positions that you can pivot from, and you give people the autonomy to enter and exit. It's been in the works for since the fall of last year, when Nemo started it, and we want to push the innovations on Cardano as far as we can. We partnered with, if anyone's familiar with Benjamin's Club, a couple of their senior developers, as well as multiple other projects. They're not affiliated with them. They came together and they created a minting service and development company called Ada Anvil. And they're officially our premier minting service, and we're kind of their crash test dummy. And I mean that in a joking way, but we've already in this current mint that's going on, we're trying out a couple different things where people have said on Cardano for a long time, we want to be able to mint mobily. And not just mint mobily where you can copy, ADA address from a Discord and throw it in there, but true multi-sig, minting through Eternal app or something like that. So this drop is the first one. Well, aside from a charity that I was working on prior that we test ran it on, it's the first time that you're going to be able to go into Eternal and mint directly through a multi-sig process on the Eternal dApp. And it's actually within that system. So not only are we doing that, but another cool thing is we have affiliate referral links, which obviously you want to use in the right way. But let's say if there's a slower mint or a project that might be unheard of. So you want to spread the word and talk about the project, but maybe a way to give back to individuals or support the team. You could have a link and you put your ADA handle at the end of it. And when you mint, 10%, 5%, whatever percentage the team decides on could go to the person's link that you use, and you can support people in the community. You could have your link shared and people could support you just for being a community member. So these are all novel concepts in NFTs in general, but I feel like they're important when it comes to an NFT project. And with our mint ending on the 25th, I just wanted to showcase this if I can, and hopefully I don't mess this up.
See if you can share just hit on share screen and share again, and then you should be able to pick your monitor. But yeah, no, I mean, and to kind of go off of this, like, it's been an awesome conversation, very, very deep conversation. I have learned a tremendous amount, and I would love to do this sort of thing again, man. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people watching have gotten a lot of value out of this too, and definitely at least have some additional perspectives. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on here, Viva.
I love it. And it's looking like it's allowing me to share. It's moving a little slow. Let me see. Let me try and share. If I can't, I'll just do it verbally. That's fine. Like I don't want it to be all about this. I just wanted to highlight it. It's probably part of the consequence of just moving in here and getting the Wi-Fi set up 48 hours ago. And
here, I can share my screen.
Yeah, I'll send.
This is the
here.
Twitter. Yeah, where do you want me to go? Direct me.
Here, I'll send you the link. Give me 1 second, and I'll actually, if you want to test it out, I'll even send you the ADA just to show kind of what it looks like. But I'll even send you the ADA just to show kind of what it looks like. There we go. Okay, it's back. It was lagging. So if I'm just going to talk, I'll even send here because I can hear my voice, but I'll just keep talking. There we go. Okay, it's back. It was
what's going on?
So if I'm just going to talk, I'll even send here because I can hear my voice, but I'll just keep talking. There we go. Okay, it's back. It was
what's
lagging,
going on?
so if I'm just going to talk, I'll even say here. Could I end the share? It's just on a loop. There we go.
Yeah, wait, just end yours. Yeah, and end your screen, whatever. What? I think you're playing a video, aren't you?
There we go.
Yeah, wait, just end yours. Yeah, and
Okay,
I think you were playing a video or something.
Yeah. So what happened was when I went to when I went to click off to send you the link, I had the YouTube channel pulled up initially when you sent me over the stream, and I guess in that lag when I was sharing my screen, it pulled up that channel, and I must have clicked to play. But what I wanted to show you, and I'll just send you the link. But you could see this even if you went to, if anyone has the Eternal app, and you're watching that live, you could pull that up on your phone. You'll see it down the DApp section. But Pneumonium, in and of itself, Josh Jones is our artist that did this, but he was in Cardano since 2020 and did photography, and he has a different project called Deep World NFT. Incredible 3D artist, and he reminds me a lot of another one of our team members and artists. If you know Fauna, behind Metapixels and Skull MFers and all these different things that he put out. So for this drop, this was the main one that we enabled, not only for the multi-segment mobily with the referral links, but Ada Anvil and our other creative Penny Dents that created this website made a super cool interface, just trying to bring more of a premier professional way of minting. So if you linked up your wallet, we had a way that you could sync up not only, to mint, but we had a previous token that was minted back in January that people could burn in order to mint one. But the entire process is very seamless. That mint that does end is more or less because we were never like our only focus is to sell it out. We're only selling for X amount of time. And then whatever we have, we know that it has its place in the ecosystem and what we want to build over the course of those 4 phases. But between bridging the gap and creating partnerships with Ada Anvil, reaching out to DAO to bridge beyond Cardano, pulling over Ethereum artists to work for us, and having a litany of different team members, artists, developers, etc. It's really been the number one highlight of my entire time in crypto, not even in NFTs, because in this organization, it's really everything I stand for, to where it's not about the money, it's about community. And I know community is kind of used as a buzzword, but everyone there is really family to me at this point. And some of the artists that we've been able to highlight, the directions in which we're heading, giving people sort of materials that do educate them. Like every video I've ever done on Pneumonium, and that includes all the DAO offs that I did with Jay Crypto on his channel, meeting up with a DAO and all these different projects when they were coming out, including my personal content. I share it all on that channel and break it down for people. We have people that do write-ups and create proposals, individuals that teach people about liquidity pools. And we have a stake pool with 1.3 million Cardano staked at the moment, Skull stake pool that is ran by another partner of ours that's also a part of the community that creates passive income and stability for the ecosystem as a whole. So for us, if we can help establish a strong community in Cardano as a whole, bring new ways to be able to mint in a secure way, educate people as we go, support new and upcoming artists, and still be able to financially move forward together, then that aligns with every value that I have. And it's funny how it started, and then I'll let you go because I know that we went a little over and you have stuff planned for the night. But the entire process and every drop that we had, and all the Cardano that was staked or moved, Nemo that's been around in Cardano to the point where like he was loading up at like 2 cents, like he's a Cardano OG, but big decentralization guy. He did a 75 piece Twitter mint. He just dropped an address and he was like, hey, I made something. I'm not an artist, but I want to say thank you to the people that have been here, over the course of time and give something back. And those initial 75 people were what we consider the OG people in Pneumonium. It wasn't because they were paid to do it, and it wasn't because of some hype or influence. They minted those initial skulls because they trusted Nemo, or they had friendships with Nemo. And it's a little counterintuitive now, but looking at it, it makes sense that you build a foundation of integrity and camaraderie and community and transparency through that trust that you build with people over the course of time, every interaction that you've had through the years. Now those people that trusted him, instead of having one or two people behind a project that have to, dictate what they're doing in a roadmap for 9,000 people wondering, oh, when this, when that, what's coming. Now you have 75 ambassadors that not only trusted in this person enough to mint their art that they just made because they wanted to see who believed in them, but then you have a full team of developers and dozens of artists that are working on multiple things, everywhere from different metaverse concepts to art to DAO utility in the future. And it's being done ethically, transparently, and professionally. It's surreal to me. But I'll always stand there and speak on the things that I believe in. And I feel like over the course of time, we'll be able to bring a lot of good to this community. And I think that as we continue to build this out, that's where a lot of my educational platform can be housed once I'm not just educating people about the concept of what Pneumonium is or what a decentralized autonomous organization can be. So it's just really exciting. And I appreciate you for allowing me to, I hate the term shill, but more or less to share, what we're currently working on, because it's just a tireless effort from everyone involved. And if any of you guys watch this, I love you.
Beautiful. I'm definitely going to have to check that out and, maybe even do an interview that's more focused on that project another time, man. But I appreciate you coming on, Viva. It's been a massive learning experience. I have a lot of takeaways and a lot of things that I'm going to think about deeper now after this conversation. And you've kind of fired me up to research more and to learn more. I think sometimes you can, like kind of what you were saying, get burned out, or sometimes you'll start focusing on just like a small niche. And I'm like right now I'm so enveloped with NFTs, especially on Cardano, and I'm launching my own project, and I'm about to move to Portugal, and I've got so many things going on that sometimes you can kind of just tunnel vision and in a sense like get comfortable. And like you just made me realize, like, damn, man, like I gotta get on it. I gotta research more, learn more, grow more. So I appreciate it, man, for you coming on, and definitely give him a follow, guys. I had his 2 Twitters up here. I'll show it again real quick. That was not what I wanted to do. Share screen. Yeah, so to kind of share this again real quick, guys, you can follow Pneumonium at and then a little underscore Pneumonium. And then you also have Viva's a whole entire channel as well. VivalaCoin Bitcoin. Love it. And, obviously you guys are going to have their website as well at nemo.global. But yeah, any last remarks before we end here, man?
No. Well, actually, yes, but I'll keep it very brief and let you get moving. So if anyone follows me on Twitter or wants to learn more about Pneumonium, never hesitate to reach out to me, even though I talk to people like block all day, and sometimes it's intimidating to speak publicly or reach out to people. I'm always open. Never hesitate to reach out to me, even if it's an unrelated question. I'll try and help if I can. And if I can't, I'll tell you. I won't waste your time. And then aside from that, I wanted to thank you for showcasing that. And I want to learn more about what you're doing with block investment. It really, really intrigues me. And I feel like a lot of our values and the way that we view things align. That next show that I can come on for, maybe we could plan something out in the future so I'm not clogging up your schedule. Or I mean, obviously in DMs, as you plan stuff out, you can hit me up. But I think that talking about it in the way that you presented it on Shark Tank, and what you've heard me say here today, it's going to be a very good mix of a conversation to hear what all you want to bring to the space. And I think that it's something that the space is hurting for. a really transparent way to lean into educated people that will help them as opposed to take advantage of them. So if we can plan that out, that's my only ask out of all of this is I'd love to hear more about what you have planned as well.
Love it, dude. We'll get it rolling. But yeah, hope everyone enjoyed this little interview thing, kind of conversation, learning experience today, and have a good day, guys.
Thank you.